Umair Anas for taking this initiative. Professor Azmi, Ozcan, and distinguished participants for today's lecture. We could not have got a more distinguished speaker than Professor Azmi Ozcan, who is well known for his historical work, his pioneering seminal work on India-Turkey historical relations. He published his book on Indian Muslims, the Ottomans, and the British in the 19th century after the end of First World War, for which he ransacked the documents, the archival material from London to Istanbul to New Delhi and many other parts in India. And that book remains the foundational work which highlights a very long period, historical period for documenting Indo-Turkish relations and bringing to light many facts, many issues which many historians had not probed in detail. So with this, Professor Azmi Ozcan is the appropriate person to start the chapter on Indo-Turkish relations because, as they say, those who don't read or understand history will be forced to do that to revive the historical relation. Just to add 1 or 2 points before I give the floor to Professor Azmi, until the Turkish control of Istanbul in 1453, the Ottoman relations with India were multifaceted from political, economic, cultural, and it spanned hundreds of years. But the entry of the Portuguese after the 1453 takeover of Constantinople, which led to the geographical discoveries, the Portuguese started encroaching much of the Ottoman areas in the Red Sea area, in the Gulf area, and also in much of the Indian Ocean region, where they completely took over the ports in East Africa, in the Arabian Peninsula, in the west coast, particularly of India. So the major trade and commerce which Ottoman Empire had with the East, especially in spices, textiles, and many other items, this was a setback. And the Ottomans devised a policy of links with the Egyptians, with the Omanis, and with Indian rulers in Gujarat and Kerala. And they tried to contain the Portuguese offensive and expansion in this region, which had virtually subjugated or contained the trade in the Indian Ocean region, because from this trade, all the participants from the Indian subcontinent, from the Gulf region, Arabs, Persians, and then the Armenians and the Africans from East Africa and other parts had mutually benefited from this extensive trade. And the entry of the Portuguese and other Europeans, led to three major things. First, they brought huge ships with weapons loaded on them, cannons, etc., iron ships, which was new in the region. Secondly, they took over ports and had built forts there and occupied coastal regions. And then they put up the flag, the Portuguese flag, subsequently the Dutch and other European flags, taking over territory and preventing the local traders, local rulers from using this, which was a great source of revenue for them. So the first major Asian alliance was between the Ottoman rulers, the Egyptians, Oman, and the Gujarati governor, supported by the Kunjali Marakas from Kerala. So in this, the Portuguese were defeated in the early part of 15th, 16th century. And this was a blow because the fleet built in Sur in the Sinai Peninsula near Suez, that armada, was commanded by a Turkish naval commander, and he played an important role from Diu in present-day Gujarat. So from that day onwards, the Turks reactivated their interest from Yemen to Aden to Suez, through Muscat, through Bahrain, through Basra, and various other links which they had in the entire region. So the onset of colonialism, of which Professor Azmi has done, especially European colonialism, he has done extensive work on the history of colonialism. With these few words, I would now request Professor Azmi Ozcan to throw light on the India-Turkey historical and civilizational ties for about 40 to 45 minutes. Over to you, Professor Azmi.
Thank you, Professor Kamal Pasha. Good afternoon to all. Indeed, perhaps good evening in India. It's my pleasure, and thank you for the kind invitation, which availed me to see many friends after all these years, especially after this coronavirus diseases. It's my really a great pleasure. Well, in fact, the history of Indians and Turks are so interrelated, so twinely mixed together that one cannot separate. In fact, what I call is the lost episode of Turkish history. It goes back thousands years back, but in modern times, we all know that the link started with the Mahmud of Ghazni towards the end of the 10th century. From then on, India became the home of the Turkish people as well, from Turkestan, from Central Asia. Regarding the Western Turkish, the Anatolian Turkish, obviously, as Professor Aftaf Kamal Pasha rightly said, the link started with the conquest of Istanbul, Constantinople by the Turks in 1453, which evoked remarkable veneration and respect for the Sultan Muhammad Fatih in the whole South Asia. Many people and rulers sought to establish diplomatic relations hereafter. They sent letters of jubilations, and also they wanted to establish commercial links, especially the Gujarat merchants. But the important date for the strengthening relations with the people of the subcontinent was the Sultan Selim of Ottoman Sultan Selim in 1517 with the conquest of Hijaz Peninsula and Egypt. At the time when the European encroachments were disturbing the South Indian coast, especially the Portuguese, were harming the relations, the commercial as well as religious relations of Hijaz Peninsula with the subcontinent. So Sultan Selim, after the assumption of the universal caliphate at that date, offered help to the South Indian people against the Portuguese, because the Portuguese were posing a very serious military threat and their seaborne trade. And also the route of Indian Muslims Hajj to holy places being endangered. So the first Ottoman fleet landed at Diu in 1531 with a force of around 2,000 soldiers. This was followed by another greater expeditions. It was also time when the Baburi power was established in 1526. So from that time onward, the history of the subcontinent with the West Asian Turks, namely the Ottomans, can be rightly regarded the links between the Baburids and the Ottomans. According to the Ottoman sources, there is no record of any official link until Jahangir's reign of 1600. But Shah Jahan presumably was the first Baburi ruler to. We know that he sent a mission and wrote a letter to Sultan Murad, the Ottoman Sultan, calling him at the time as the Khan of the Muslim kings. His diplomatic letter and mission started several exchanges between two rulers. Towards the end of 18th century, during the reign of Aurangzeb, official links between the Ottomans appear to be at their lowest ebb because of the distance, perhaps, or because of mainly the advance of the Europeans. The land journey was very difficult, but sea road was under threat of European colonialists at the time. So the chaos at the time was prevalent in the subcontinent, mainly because of the death of Aurangzeb. The power struggle among his members of his dynasty obviously affected the relations with them. After the death of Aurangzeb, the Babur power gradually disintegrated, and the British power made a great impact upon the Indians. By the end of the 18th century, among growing despair and confusion, many people in the subcontinent developed a kind of attachment to the Ottomans as the most prestigious Asian power, and also the Caliph of Muslims. Perhaps because of this gradual consolidation of the supremacy of Ottomans in the subcontinent, the people, by and large, sought help from the Ottomans against the European invaders in their struggle. Mainly the rulers of Malabar and Mysore kingdoms to start with. Even the governors of Deccan, Nizam ul-Mulk, Nasir Jang, tried to obtain help from the Ottomans against the British. No doubt the British too, they were also aware of the growing links between the people of the subcontinent and the Ottomans. Obviously, they put pressure on the Ottomans in their favor to solve their problems which they were facing in the subcontinent. Just timely for the British, towards the middle of the 19th century, the famous Crimean War of 1853, in which the Ottomans fought against the Russians, they desperately in need of British help. This period was an unfortunate time for the Indians because after a few years, starting Crimean War, the great mutiny, the great upheaval in India started against the British colonialism. During this upheaval, during this great mutiny, the British, we know that took full advantage of the help they had given to the Ottomans during the Crimean War a few years back. They not only obtained permission from the Istanbul government for the passage of their troops to subcontinent from Egypt through Suez Canal, but also secured, it is claimed that it secured a letter of proclamation from the Sultan as Caliph, advising the Indians, mostly the Muslims, not to fight against the British. According to historical sources, this proclamation was said to be circulated in many cities and mosques and buildings, and became very effective at the time. The mutiny entailed the loss of one of the great Asian Muslim powers at the time in the subcontinent. India officially became a colony of the British Empire. Many leaders of the society were either killed or sent outside the country. So India was left almost helpless at the time, quickly became colonized in every respect of, in all walks of time and life. Therefore, from that time onwards, the spiritual attachment of Indians with the Ottoman Turks, representing last great powers of Asian empires, was beyond any description. We see the remnants and the signs of this great attachment, especially in the Russia-Turkish War of 1877 and 1878, during which Russians fought against the Ottomans, but there was huge support from the subcontinent for the Ottomans. They sent every kind of help, whatever possible there. We have thousands of documents in respective archives. They formed organizations in every cities, great cities. They collected monies. They started many newspapers. They wrote articles, letters, calling people to support the Ottomans. We have many documents which I think waiting for the young scholars to exploit them. Especially the press was very outspoken. All sectors of the society, right from the Russia-Turkish War of 1857 onwards, throughout the 19th century, the remaining parts of the 19th century, all sectors of the society, the educated as well as illiterate, they were very eager to receive the latest information on day-to-day developments in Turkey, because they put so much interest in the future of Turkey that once Turkey became a powerful state again, they will throw the yokes of European colonials and again save the subcontinent as well as the other Asian soils. In a way, the people of the subcontinent linked their future with the fate of the Ottoman Empire, as it was symbolized in the persons of the great leaders of Ottoman Empire. This great attachment and concern and interest was demonstrated generally in two respects. One was the establishment of large number of organizations in almost every city to raise subscriptions and opening relief funds. Second was the drawing resolutions appealing to the Queen and the British government to defend the Ottomans against the Russians. Apart from moral and financial support, especially the Muslim press were calling people to encourage volunteers to fight against the Russians. Practical steps were also taken, guidelines were published, people were encouraged to go to Anatolia. Even some people were reported to have gone to Anatolia to fight against the Russians in line with the Ottomans. No doubt, needless to say that the money collected was enormous, despite the fact that Indians were suffering hardship in many parts of the subcontinent at the time. So the Russo-Turkish wars was in many ways unique and unprecedented. It was unique because nowhere else there was such a large scale and heartfelt sympathy for the Turks. It was unprecedented because the public opinion, the support was manifested itself in an institutionalized form, united through several organizations and newspapers, and also books and articles in many newspapers. It was clear that the British at the time realized the pro-Turkish developments in India was a very powerful factor which cannot be neglected from that time onwards. From the turn of the century until the deposition of Sultan Abdülhamid II, the pro-Turkish and pro-Ottoman manifestation of the subcontinent people was to remain deeply rooted. The chief feature was the resentment felt at every attempt by the Europeans, be Britain or another, to coerce the Ottoman state. There was also a new vigor that Western educated young generation, represented especially by Aligarh. They were also becoming more and more interested in the fortunes of the Ottoman Empire and the Sultan in Istanbul. Consequently, issues to develop relations or sending students to Istanbul, extending commercial relations between the subcontinent and the Ottoman Empire, which cannot be heard before. So they became discussed. Many of them, of course, because of the conditions, found no chance to be materialized. In a similar way, famous Hijaz Railway served as a great link between the Muslims of the subcontinent, especially with the Ottomans, for quite a long time. It was regarded as a symbol of the capability of Ottoman Empire to resist European superiority, and it represented the technological advancement of the Turkish Empire at the time. In the subcontinent, appeals for donations were heard everywhere and found a very encouraging response. In a short time, Central Committee of Hijaz Railways was formed in many big cities of the subcontinent, and tremendous subscriptions were poured into. So in 1908, when the Hijaz Railway extended to the Medina city, it was regarded as a sign that the Turkish Empire, last great Muslim empire, was still strong and capable of the protecting the interest of people, especially those in the colonial countries. But when the Young Turk Revolution became successful in 1908, there were some hesitancy in the subcontinent. Young Turk were first regarded as a tool of the European colonialism. It was very obviously bad for them. So soon they realized that they needed the support of the people of India. They sent emissaries to explain themselves. So they, within short time, convinced the Indian people. In fact, the Young Turk episode of Turkish history is not a deviation from their path. It was a kind of a new energy for the future of neglected and exploited people. So within a short time, again, they built the confidence with the people of the India. Links again started. The Young Turk experiment was seen as the new hope of colonized people. That's why in many countries at the time, the new generation who are against the European colonialism was also termed as the Young Turks of India or Young Turks of, say, Tunis or Egypt. The name Young Turk became a kind of sign those who are fighting for freedom of their countries. But the developments in Turkey for the Young Turks obviously was not bright as they hoped. Right after the deposition of Abdullah II, the Italians also attacked Libya, and after that, the Balkan states again attacked the Ottoman Empire with the encouragement of Russians in 1912. So the news of war created a sensation in the subcontinent. Once again, subscriptions were raised and virtually hundreds of meetings were held in many cities throughout the country to express support and condemn what they regarded as the European brigandage and European colonial acts. The effects of 1911 upon the Indian minds proved to be significant in many ways. Disappointment, disillusionment, and the reaction against the British indifference against the interest of Indian people. Obviously, the start of the First World War was a great blow because politically, India was under British sovereignty, but spiritually, there was a very close link with the people of Turkey. So, in fact, two parts of their hearts fight against each other. But in the meantime, many Indian people explain their support towards the Turks, despite the fact they were under British subjugation. Among the endeavors at the time, the people of India, two were very outstanding. One was the Indian Red Crescent mission to Ottoman Empire, which we all know. But the second one was very politically important, but less known, is the foundation of Anjuman Khuddam Kaaba, which we'll talk about later. The Red Crescent mission performed 8 months of humanitarian service in Anatolia and returned to subcontinent in 1913. During their stay of 8 months, the mission was carried a great service for the relief of suffering Ottoman soldiers. Based on their impressions, the members carried off vigorous pro-Turkish propaganda by a series of appealing articles which were published in many press in India. The less known Anjuman Khuddam Kaaba was mainly conceived to protect the holy place of Islam from the non-Muslim aggression during the war. According to promoters, the Ottoman Empire, the guardian of holy place of Islam, was getting weaker and weaker, and subsequently the sanctity of the holy places was being endangered. So it was the duty of whole Muslims uh, to protect the safety and sanctity of holy places. Uh, so in many cities, societies were formed. They obviously appealed to the British authorities to have permission. They planned to collect money and buy few warplanes to protect the holy places. Obviously, during the First World War, these kind of aspirations were regarded as harmful by the British, and the society was closed, and the members were jailed or some were sent to exile. The developments during the First World War obviously was a trap for the Indians. The end of the Ottoman Empire was a real blow. At the end of the war, obviously, so-called the Caliphate movement, the famous Caliphate movement started by the Indians, under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. I think this part of our mutual history is extremely important from to understand the developments hereafter. That's why I'll give a little bit more information on this. After the war, local and regional Khilafat movements were established over the country. Mahatma Gandhi presided over the Delhi meeting. They asked for the Indian representation at the peace conference in Europe, and specifically stressed upon the condition that Istanbul should remain as the capital of Turkish state. The Khilafat issue was taken up by the main representative of Indian society, the All India Muslim League, the Congress, the newly founded Central Khilafat Committee. They decided to send delegation to advocate the Khilafat cause, the Turkish cause, to Europe and England. In all India, the Khilafat Day was declared on the 17th of October 1919. Mahatma Gandhi issued statements to encourage the Indians, and it was a very successful experiment. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in many meeting places in different cities. In early 1920, a Muslim delegation met with the Viceroy. They explained the aim of the movement, and they warned the Viceroy that if their demands not met, it will be a catastrophe for the British in India. They also drew attention to the numerous promises made in the past. The Viceroy replied them that he would continue to impress on the government in London about the viewpoint of Indians, and convince the British government for the just solution for all parts. So the Indian Khilafat delegation reached London on February 1912, had several official talks with the ministers. They explained the Indian view very clear, full way, claiming that Turkish issue is a fundamental issue for the Indians, that Britain should keep their promises they made towards the Indians regarding the Turkish issues, and also requested that Turkish territories should remain unspoiled. But unfortunately for the delegation, the members of delegation, developments were not promising, and they almost returned to Bombay in 1920, in October 1920, a bit empty-handed. Again, the British government clearly disregarded their assurances and the promises they made to the Indians regarding the Turkish issue. When the Khilafat delegation returned India, it almost empty-handed. Obviously, the situation was very tense, and the leaders of the community described the question. They stand on the Turkish side as the matter of death and life in India. So the new means of struggle were decided, and there was no one was to work in government offices in order to implement the policy of non-cooperation, in which no force was to be used. This was, non-violence, passive movement. This was regarded as a test of popular feeling in India. On June 22, Mahatma Gandhi wrote his famous letter to Viceroy, protesting the treatment of European powers to the Ottoman Empire. Some people also were encouraged to migrate to Afghanistan, regarding that from then onwards, it is unlawful for religious wise to remain in India, to live under the British subjugation. This non-cooperation movement was initially gained ground and peacefully, but as time passed, because of the British maneuvers, violence started up, creeping up in the country. Anarchy and the spirit of uprising became evident everywhere. At this point, Gandhi felt that he should call off the police and suspend the masses and civil disobedience, because things getting out of control. Another type of reaction to the Allies, to the Europeans' treatment to the Ottoman Empire and Britain's discards of Indian aspiration was the Hijrat movement, as before mentioned. Sources says around 60,000 people were estimated to have attempted migration. In August 1920 alone, 25,000 were reported to left India towards Turkestan and Afghanistan. Many of them, unfortunately, died in winter conditions. It was a humiliation, disillusionment, and hardship of the journey cost the thousands of lives at the time. Obviously, these sacrifices made by the Indians just for the sake of the agony they felt for the Turkish friends in Turkey. The political developments in Turkey also surprised the people in India, because in March 1924, all of a sudden, Turkish parliament dissolved the institution of the caliphate. It was a great shock for the Indian, especially for the Muslims. When they received the news, they didn't believe it at first, but when it was confirmed, they blasphemy, they call it. The reaction of Muslim powers, Muslim leaders were also even bitter. Ankara's decision protested, regarded as against the tenets of Islam. They offered Ankara to send a delegation to discuss the matters, but Ankara did not accept it. After the initial shock, the Khilafat supporters in the subcontinent, seeing that Ankara was not prepared to withdraw and cancel its decision, suggested Mustafa Kemal Pasha to become a new caliph. Instead of abolishing the institution, he should himself became the caliph, but Mustafa Kemal Pasha obviously found it repulsive and rejected. So this was in fact signaled the end of romantic times between the people of subcontinent and the Turks. But in all, the subcontinent people, the Indians, having shared the mutual history of thousands of years back, never, cut their links and interest towards the developments in Turkey. But bear in mind that it was a time very difficult. Soon after the Second World War started, the agenda was completely different. So from then onwards, until the foundation of new India Republic, links were gradually fell down. But after 1947, again, embassies were opened in mutual countries. But unfortunately, it was a time of Cold War, so India and Turkey stand on different representative times, because India was the leader of non-aligned and Turkey was the member of NATO. So until the end of Cold War period, the relations very limited. From 1990 onwards, obviously, two countries, because of cultural heritage, respected histories and shared past, obviously eager to develop their relations, and many official delegations respectively visited each countries. If I'm not wrong, now the volume of trade is around $20 billion now. If this coronavirus, I think, overcome, I think it will double or triple. My first Indian experience was around the end of 1980s. Obviously, things were very difficult. Life was very difficult. Many friends in India felt me that as if I am living in my home. I remember many friends from that day, Dr. Prasad, Dr. Obviously Mohammed Sadek, the pioneering, Naimur Rahman Fariki, Mansura Haidar, Iqtidar Hussain Saab, Shukla, Dr. Shukla, Ashwini Mohapatra, of course, Kemal Pasha, new generation, Mujib Alam, my namemate, Rafiuddin Azmi, and many others, Mushir Hasan Saab, obviously made my stay very joyful there. I continue my links with them. Whenever they visit Turkey, obviously, it was my great pleasure to host them here. Now we have our students in India as well as in Turkey. I think it is their responsibility to develop mutual links, because after all these years academic experience work, I realized that we cannot do without India, and Indians cannot do without Turkey and Turks. It is our responsibility to suggest to the this great factor decision makers in both countries. Thank you very much indeed for your patience and for the invitations. Anas Saab.
Thank you,
Yes,
Professor Azmi Ozcan, for a brilliant expose covering the period, particularly the end of 19th century and bringing us to the beginning of 20th century, the
He will be back soon, I think, in a few seconds.
You can't make up anything.
Because he told me that whenever there is a flight going on over his office, then the connection gets poor. And you know, JNU is very close to the airport.
Yes, very close. I remember my JNU days. I was a member of Indian Objective Studies, I think headed by Kamal Pasha at that time. I am not sure whether it still remains now.
Okay, I think that Professor Pasha will join us back in a few minutes. But for that time, I would just like to thank you very much for this excellent discussion. And the reason we wanted to have you as our speaker is that anyone who is going to work on India-Turkey historical relations, he has to pass through your books, your writings. So there is no escape from your writings. So at every step, as a researcher, I found that I have to read your articles, your discussions. So that's why that your today's speech was so excellent and rich. So I would just like to add a few my personal experiences as well. When I started working on Ottoman India archives, these days I am working on some articles about Ottoman India relations based on these archives. For example, I found many archives about Sufism. So earliest Sufi connections between India and Turkey goes back to 16th century. So first Sufi from India came to and settled in Sofia. And then he came to Istanbul. And there are so many letters. And these letters are so beautiful. For example, the Ottoman Prime Minister is writing a Baratname for these Sufi travelers that they are coming from India and they want to be staying here. So we recommend that they should be hosted and they should be given the best possible hospitality. So there are so many letters of Baratname for these Sufis. Similarly, then about the late Ottoman newspapers have so generous discussions about Rabindranath Tagore. Of course, Gandhi is also there. And the late Ottoman relations, as you have mentioned, have so many documents about it. And Hejaz Railway, you have mentioned, I found some documents mentioning how much amount has been paid by which organization, for example, from Hyderabad to Rampur to different provinces. And these one important aspect of intellectual exchange between India and the Ottomans also came in these documents. For example, the Prime Minister of Hyderabad at that time, he requested that many of the books which the Ottomans have found from Europe, they should also be sent to Hyderabad either as original or copy. So the Prime Minister is instructing that these books should be sent to Hyderabad at the request of the Hyderabadi Prime Minister. And similarly, many other occasions we found that the generosity of this relationship and this closeness of this relationship is so much visible. So thank you very much for this enriching talk. And I would like to open the session for brief question and answer. I would request everyone who wants to ask a question to briefly introduce yourself and make a brief question. So yes, and we will also read questions from chat box indeed. Please raise your hands.
Sir, I am Patnaik. I am advocate from Bombay High Court. I am a student of International Relations in Bombay University. I heard the speech and we are also aware of all this, but the current scenario change of Turkey going to NATO side or remaining this side or not playing a proper role in the war of Nagorno-Karabakh. What is the future for that?
Should we take more questions? Professor, yes, Professor Azmi, would you like to take more question in one round or one by one?
Yeah, I think better to receive the questions and then
All right,
answer
all
them.
right. So Ambassador Trigunayat has raised his hand. Please, Ambassador Trigunayat.
Professor Azmi, it was wonderful listening to you, and it has been such a fabulous journey down the memory lane, so to say. The historical perspective that you have provided of the relationship is amazing. My name is Anil Trigunayat. I have been a former Indian ambassador to Jordan, Libya, and Malta, and have been closely following developments in Middle East and West Asia. Now, as we have seen and everybody has commented, our historic relationship has been excellent. And courtesy researchers like you, we all know the minutest details of our interactions in the past. What I would be interested in that it seems that despite such a great complementarity between our two economies, between the Sufism or between the thought process in general, today, I mean, recently, let's say about 20 years or so, the bilateral relationship has certain political glitches. Do you think this can be overcome, or it is part of the geopolitical game? Thank you.
Yes,